There must be few persons who have not heard, among their friends and acquaintance, instances of what is called a wraith, that in the moment of death, a person is seen in a place where bodily he is not. I believe the Scotch used this term also in the same sense as the Irish word fetch, which is a person's double seen at some indefinite period previous to his death, of which such an appearance is generally supposed to be a prognostic. The Germans express the same thing by the word doppelganger. That is one of the first uses of the word doppelganger in English, from Catherine Crowe's Night Side of Nature, originally published in 1848. And tonight, that's what we're discussing. Let's get into it. Intro music.
Intro music. First intro music of 2025.
2025.
I have a good feeling about 2025.
I have a hopeful feeling about 2025. I don't want to jinx it by saying I'm feeling good about it.
That's fair.
Because I felt good about 2024.
I didn't. 2024 was kind of like a year for me.
Yeah.
Like, I think 2024 set me up for 2025, but like in January I was feeling about it, and in December I was feeling about it.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah. Anyway, I'm Lisa. My pronouns are she, they.
Oh yeah, I'm Celeste. My pronouns are she, her.
Welcome back to Dreary Midnight. I hope you enjoyed a dreary December.
Oh my god, it was so good.
It was so fun.
I hope you guys loved it as much as we loved it.
Editing Lisa had a bit of a headache.
Sorry,
but it was worth it. It was worth it.
I gave you a shout out in Instagram.
Appreciate that. But welcome to 2025. Yeah, so we're talking about doppelgangers. So this is a topic that Celeste has wanted to do for a while, I think.
I know.
And I kind of stole
hard.
it.
It's okay, kid. Yeah. So Lisa texted me like, hey, is it cool if I do doppelgangers? And I responded, oh, hell yeah.
All right.
Because I know that as much as I love certain topics, you're very good at research. So I'm very excited.
I found a few stories. Most of them are 19th century, which is interesting in its own thing. I did not deep dive as much as I would have liked to deep dive, but it's still...
We can always do a part 2 later if there's anything missing.
It's a wide enough net that we can definitely do stuff later. So what is a doppelganger? A doppelganger, basically according to Wikipedia, is a ghostly double, often an omen of death or harm. If you see your own, it is often an omen of death. If someone else sees it, sometimes it's death, sometimes it's just harm, not necessarily struck dead, but still sick in some way. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It's sometimes considered an evil twin, but that's not necessarily the core part of it.
Interesting.
According to Wikipedia, the word doppelganger is the loan word from the German noun, which literally means double walker. In German, the single and plural are the same. In English, we do the S or ES as we usually do. The first known use in the form of Doppelganger occurs in a novel from 1796 by Jean Paul, in which he explains his newly coined word in a footnote. The word doppelganger also appears in the novel because the original one was Doppelganger, but with a different meaning. And the different meaning basically was that Ganger can also mean course, as in course of a meal. And so the author was talking about, oh my god, there was this great first course, and then also there's a doppelganger, and then a second course came.
Got it. Oh, that's so interesting how language works like that.
Yeah, I love it. By the 1840s, the term wraith or fetch was more frequently used for the folklore of the British Isles. And there is an idea of some kind of double all over. But we're mostly doing British Isles today.
Got it. Sorry, did you say that it was in a novel? What novel was it in again?
It's called, I'm gonna butcher this, Bunkenat? I'll leave the I apologize to all of the Germans of Dreary
what
Midnight.
It's
I apologize to all of the Germans of Dreary Midnight, because...
That's okay. That's okay. I thought there was like an English translation.
British Isles, same sort of concept. It's the double of someone or something.
Okay. Real quick.
Yeah.
Do you believe in doppelgangers?
I don't not believe in doppelgangers.
That's just creepy to me.
Yeah.
This is why I was so intrigued by this topic.
Yeah.
It's just
it is
uncanny.
Yeah.
Uncanny Valley, and you know I love the Uncanny Valley.
Celeste is the stand for the Uncanny Valley. The term doppelganger became more common in English around 1848.
Okay.
Catherine Crowe's Night Side of Nature, which was quoted at the beginning. And that quote at the beginning was from Chapter 6, Double Dreaming and Trance. So this entire book is about, like, different spooky type of things. Chapter 8 is entirely doppelgangers and doubles, and Chapter 9 is all wraiths. Which is more of a confirmed, either someone's about to die or someone just died and showed up at the same time to somebody else.
So it could be an omen or
it could just be like
an influence?
Randomly. We'll get into more of the doppelganger thing. So to quote Catherine Crowe again, starting at the start of Chapter 8, so this is starting at page 149. In the instances detailed in the last chapter, the apparition has shown itself, as nearly as could be discovered, at the moment of dissolution. But there are many cases in which the wraith is seen at an indefinite period before or after the catastrophe. Of these, I could quote a great number, but as they generally resolve themselves into simply seeing a person where they were not, and death ensuing very shortly afterward, a few will suffice. There is a very remarkable story of this kind, related by Macnish, which he calls a case of hallucination arising without the individual being conscious of any physical cause by which it might be occasioned.
Snappy title.
If this case stood alone, strange as it is, I should think so too. But when similar instances abound, as they do, I cannot bring myself to dispose of it so easily. The story is as follows, says Catherine Crowe. Mr. H was one day walking along the street, apparently in perfect health, when he saw, or supposed he saw, his acquaintance Mr. C walking before him. He called to him aloud, but did not seem to hear him, and continued moving on. Mr. H then quickened his pace for the purpose of overtaking him, but the other increased his also, as if to keep ahead of the pursuer, and proceeded at such a rate that Mr. H found it impossible to make up to him. This continued for some time till, on Mr. C's reaching a gate, he opened it and passed in, slamming it violently in Mr. H's face. Confounded at such a treatment from a friend, the latter instantly opened the gate and looked down the long lane into which it led, where, to his astonishment, no one was to be seen. Determined to unravel the mystery, he then went to Mr. C's house, as one does, and his surprise was great to hear that Mr. C was confined to his bed and had been so for several days.
Oh my God.
A week or two afterward, these gentlemen met at the house of a common friend, where Mr. H related the circumstance, jocularly telling Mr. C that, as he had seen his wraith, he of course could not live long. The person addressed laughed heartily, as did the rest of the party.
Oh no.
But in a few days, Mr. C was attacked with a putrid sore throat and died. And within a short period of his death, Mr. H was also in the grave.
It killed two?
It killed two.
I didn't expect Mr. H to die.
Right?
Is it if you see a doppelganger? Or did somebody go around seeing Mr. H's doppelganger and didn't say anything?
Well, that's the whole question. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes it's the one that lays eyes on the doppelganger that causes harm. Sometimes it's laying eyes on your own doppelganger causes
I've heard
harm.
of that one.
Yeah.
Like if you see your own doppelganger, you're gonna die.
Yeah. She goes on to conclude, this is a very striking case, the hastening on and the actually opening and shutting of the gate, evincing not only will, but power to produce mechanical effects.
It's like a physical, some sort of physical power.
Yeah. Especially at the time when the person was bodily elsewhere, because Mr. C is still at home.
Exactly.
It is true he was ill, and it is highly probable was at the time asleep.
Did he have any? I wonder if he had any recollection of anything. I guess it
Not
wasn't really
really.
him.
She speculates a lot that doppelgangers could be the soul separating from the body, especially for people who sleepwalk a lot.
Interesting. There was like a TikTok trend like maybe last year or the year before that was like an audio that's like if you see yourself or something, it's like do not engage or something like that. And it was like this creepy audio, but people were like making doppelganger videos. And I think that's when I was like, let's add that to the list of things to talk about. It's so creepy to me.
There's so many potential stories.
But it was like the one of the videos I saw was like a girl who thought she saw her sister outside because she was a twin. And she's like, "What are you doing out there?" And then she heard her sister talking from downstairs, like, "Who are you talking to?" And then she like looked back outside and the sister, quote unquote, was just like staring at her. So it's like she wasn't actually seeing her twin, she was seeing herself.
Oh my god.
You
Oh my
know?
god.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's I was like,
Yeah.
there's just something so uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's so uncomfy. True Irish Ghost Stories. The edition that I have was published in 2010, but the original was published in like 1905, 1910. This one starts page 233 under Miscellaneous Supernormal Experiences. Quote, in the following tale, the double or wraith of a living man was seen by 3 different people, one of whom, our correspondent, saw it through a telescope.
Oh.
She writes, in May 1883, the parish of Blank was vacant. So Mr. D, the diocesan curate, used to come out to take service on Sundays. One day there were 2 funerals to be taken, the one at a graveyard some distance off, the other at Blank churchyard, the one that was still vacant. My brother was at both, the far off one being taken the first. The house we then lived in looked down towards the Blank churchyard, which was about a quarter of a mile away. From an upper window, my sister and I saw 2 surpliced figures going out to meet the coffin, and said, why, there are 2 clergy. Having supposed that there would be only Mr. D, I, being short-sighted, used a telescope, and saw the 2 surplices showing between the people. But when my brother returned, he said, a strange thing has happened. Mr. D and Mr. W, the curate of the neighboring parish, took the far-off funeral. I saw them both again at Blank, but when I went into the vestry, I only saw Mr. W. I asked where Mr. D was, and he replied that he had left immediately after the first funeral and had to go to Kilkenny, and that Mr. W had come on alone to take the funeral at Blank.
Weird.
Yeah. But then, so this other one kind of freaked me out a little bit more. And this one is also from True Irish Ghost Stories. It's from the city of Limerick, of a lady's double being seen, with no consequent results. So this is a few pages later, page 237. It sent Mr. Richard Hogan as a personal experience of his sister, Mrs. Mary Murnane, on October 25th, 1913, at 4:30 in the afternoon. Mr. Hogan left the house in order to purchase some cigarettes. A quarter of an hour afterwards, Mrs. Murnane went down the town to do some business.
Okay.
As she was walking down George Street, she saw a group of 4 persons standing on the pavement engaged in conversation. They were her brother, Mr. O.S., and 2 ladies, Miss P and Miss M. She recognized the latter, Miss M, as her face was partly turned towards her, and noticed that she was dressed in a knitted coat and light blue hat, while in her left hand she held a bag or a purse. The other lady's back was turned towards her, so she kind of recognizes M and sees P from the back. As Mrs. Murnane was in a hurry to get her business done, she determined to pass them by without being noticed, but a number of people coming in the opposite direction blocked the way and compelled her to walk quite close to the group of 4.
Oh.
But they were so intent on listening to what one lady was saying that they took no notice of her. The speaker appeared to be Miss M, and though Mrs. Murnane did not actually hear her speak as she passed her, yet from their attitudes, the other 3 seemed to be listening to what she was saying, and she heard her laugh when she was right behind her.
Oh.
Not the laugh of her sister P. And the laugh was repeated after she had left the group a little behind. So it seems like M said something funny and everyone's laughing, right? Or
It seems like she's like, somebody's laughing. It's not my sister.
Well, so P and M are sisters, but not the person who wrote it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. The person who reported this, her brother was part of this group of 4. But that's the only one she's related to.
She heard laughter, and then she heard it again when she was walking further away.
So far, there's nothing out of common, because, people talk on the street all the time.
Exactly.
When Mrs. Murnane returned to her house about an hour later, she found her brother Richard there before her, one of the party of 4. She casually mentioned to him how she had passed him and his 3 companions on the pavement, to which he replied that she was quite correct, except in one point. Namely, that there were only 3 in the group, as Miss M was not present, as she had not gone to Limerick that day.
But she, heard her and saw her.
She then described to him the exact position each one of the 4 had occupied, and the clothes worn by them, to all of which facts he assented, except as to the presence of Miss M.
What?
Miss Murnane adds, "That is all I can say in the matter, but most certainly the 4th person was in the group, as I both saw and heard her. She wore the same clothes I had seen on her previously, with the exception of the hat. But the following Saturday, she had on the same colored hat that I had seen on her the previous Saturday. When I told her about it, she was as much mystified as I was and am. My brother stated that there was no laugh from any of the 3 present."
Oh my God.
It's so weird.
It's so weird. And it doesn't seem like anybody died because of it.
Yeah, no, it's just...
But that's weird, because that means that the people seeing, just because somebody sees this doppelganger doesn't mean everybody's going to see them.
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's so basically just because one person sees the doppelganger doesn't mean everybody's going to see the doppelganger.
Yeah. So one of the more famous ones is a school teacher that may or may not have lost her position because of the double.
Oh my God. Was the double over there doing hardcore drugs or something? Why did she lose her position?
This is from Footfalls in the Boundary of Another World with narrative illustrations. Why a Livonian schoolteacher lost her situation. Habitual apparition of a living person. There existed in the year 1845 and is still continued in Livonia, about 36 miles from Riga and a mile and a half from the small town of Volmar, an institution of high repute for the education of young ladies, entitled the Pensionat of Nuelka. I might have mispronounced that. It is under the superintendence of Moravian directors, of whom the principal, at the time of the occurrences about to be related, was named Bush. There were in that year 42 young ladies residing there as boarders, chiefly daughters of noble Livonian families. Among them, Mademoiselle Julie, second daughter of and Julie was 13 at that point.
Got it.
In this institution, one of the female teachers at that time was Mademoiselle Emilie Saget, a French lady from Dijon. She was blonde with very fair complexion, light blue eyes, chestnut hair slightly above the middle size, and of slender figure. In character, she was amiable, quiet, and good-tempered, not at all given to anger or impatience, but of an anxious disposition as to her physical temperament and somewhat nervously excitable. Her health was usually good, and during the year and a half that she lived as a teacher there, she had but 1 or 2 slight indispositions. She was intelligent and accomplished, and the directors, during the entire period of her stay, were perfectly satisfied with her conduct, industry, and requirements. She was at that time 32. A few weeks after she arrived, singular reports began to circulate among the pupils. When some casual inquiry happened to be made as to where she was, one young lady would reply that she'd seen her in such or such a room, whereupon another would say, "Oh no, she can't be there, for I've just met her on the stairway," or perhaps in some distant corridor. At first, they naturally supposed it was a mere mistake, because, she's new, you don't know her actual walking pace or anything yet. As the same thing recurred again and again, they began to think it very odd, and finally spoke to the other governesses about it. Whether the teachers at that time could have furnished an explanation or not, they gave none. They merely told the young ladies that it was all fancy nonsense and bade them pay no attention to it. But after a time, things much more extraordinary, and which could not be set down to imagination or mistake, began to occur. One day the governess was giving a lesson to a class of 13. and was demonstrating with eagerness some proposition to illustrate which she had occasion to write with chalk on a blackboard. While she was doing so, and the young ladies were looking at her, to their consternation, they saw two Mademoiselle Sagays.
What? I think I might have heard of this.
The one beside the other. They were exactly alike, and they used the same gestures, only that the real person had a bit of chalk in her hand, and did actually write, while the double had no chalk and only imitated the motion.
That's so creepy.
And what makes this so weird is that, like, the entire classroom saw it.
Apparently not her.
Yeah, except for her, apparently. This incident naturally caused a great sensation in the establishment. It was ascertained on inquiry that every one of the 13 young ladies in the class had seen the second figure, and that they all agreed in their description of its appearance and motions. Soon after, one of the pupils, Mademoiselle Antoine de Ragel, having obtained permission with some others to attend a party in the neighborhood, and had been engaged in completing her toilette, Mademoiselle Sagay, the teacher, had good-naturedly volunteered her aid, and was hooking her dress behind. The young lady, happening to turn round to look in an adjacent mirror, perceived two Mademoiselle Sagays hooking her dress.
That's creepy.
Yeah. The sudden apparition produced so much effect upon her that she fainted.
Oh my god. Yeah, I mean, me too.
Months passed by, and similar phenomena were still repeated. Sometimes at dinner, the double appeared standing behind the teacher's chair,
And the teachers never noticed?
and imitating her motions as she ate. Only that its hands held no knife and fork, and that there was no appearance of food. It's just like it's imitating her motions.
That's so creepy.
So it was only occasionally, however, that the double appeared to imitate the motions of the real person. Sometimes when the latter rose from the chair, the figure would appear seated on it. On one occasion, Mademoiselle Sagay was confined to bed with an attack of influenza. Mademoiselle de Ragel was sitting with her bedside reading to her. Suddenly, the governess became stiff and pale, and seeming as if to faint, the young lady, alarmed, asked if she was worse. She replied she was not, but in a very feeble and languid voice. A few seconds afterwards, the girl happened to look around and saw quite distinctly the figure of the governess walking up and down the apartment. This time, the young lady had sufficient self-control to remain quiet, and even to make no remark to the patient. Soon afterwards, she came downstairs, looking very pale, and related what she had witnessed.
That's so creepy.
One day, all the young ladies of the institution, to the number of 42, were assembled in the same room, engaged in embroidery. It was a spacious hall on the first floor of the principal building, and had 4 large windows, or rather glass doors, for they opened to the floor, giving entrance to a garden of some extent of the front of the house. There was a long table in the center of the room, and here it was that the various classes were wont to unite for needlework or similar occupation. On this occasion, the young ladies were all seated in the table in question, whence they could readily see what passed in the garden. And while engaged at their work, they had noticed Mademoiselle Sagay there, in the garden, not far from the house, gathering flowers, of which she was very fond. At the head of the table, seated in an armchair, sat another teacher, in charge of the pupils. After a time, this lady had occasion to leave the room, and the armchair was left vacant.
Oh.
It remained so, however, for a short time only, for of a sudden there appeared seated in it the figure of Mademoiselle Sagay. The young ladies immediately looked into the garden, and there she still was, engaged as before, until only they remarked that she moved very slowly and languidly, as a drowsy or exhausted person might. Again they looked at the armchair, and there she sat, silent and without motion, but to the sight so palpably real that, had they not seen her outside in the garden, and had they not known that she also appeared in the chair without having walked into the room, they all would have supposed that it was the lady herself. As it was being quite certain that she was not a real person, and having become to a certain extent familiar with the strange phenomenon, 2 of the boldest approached and tried to touch the figure. They averred that they felt a slight resistance, which they likened to that which a fabric of fine muslin or crepe would have offered to the touch.
Whoa.
One of the 2 then passed close in front of the armchair and actually threw a portion of the figure. The appearance, however, remained, after she had done so, for some time longer, still seated as before. At last it gradually disappeared, and then it was observed that Mademoiselle Sagay resumed, with all her usual activity, the task of flower gathering. Some of the young ladies afterward asked Mademoiselle Sagay if there was any anything peculiar in her feelings on this occasion. Like, were you feeling okay when you were gathering flowers just now? She replied that she recollected this only, that happening to look up and perceiving the teacher's armchair to be vacant, she had thought to herself, I wish she had not gone away. These girls will be sure to be idling their time and getting into some mischief.
Oh my god, so it's like her own thoughts creating a version of herself?
Yeah. Seems like it. It seemed chiefly to present itself on occasions when the lady was very earnest or eager in what she was about. It was
like a superpower.
Right? She herself, however, was totally unconscious of the phenomenon. She had first become aware of it only from the report of others, and she usually detected it by the looks of the persons present. Like, she turns around and everyone's like, and yeah.
And she's like, oh, it's probably happening again.
Yeah. But yeah, I think she eventually leaves that position.
But why? I wouldn't have fired her. I would have been like, wow, an extra chaperone for free. I could understand why they fired her, like if she's disrupting the girls to a point where they can't learn.
Yeah.
But still.
I think that's eventually what happened. Some of the more timid among the girls also became much excited and evinced great alarm whenever they happened to witness so strange and inexplicable a thing. The natural result was that their parents began to scruple about leaving them under such an influence, one after another as they went home for the holidays and failed to return. And though the true reason was not assigned to the directors, they knew it well. Being strictly upright and conscious men, however, and very unwilling that a well-conducted, diligent, and competent teacher should lose her position on account of a peculiarity that was entirely beyond her control, misfortune, not a fault, they persevered in retaining her until, at the end of 18 months, the number of pupils had decreased from 42 to 12. Yeah.
At least they were like, hey, it's not her fault. She's not doing anything wrong.
Yeah, it really did seem like they were trying to, like...
It's just the stupid girls for telling their parents.
Yeah.
And the parents for, being too freaked out. I guess as a parent, I might be like, you're staying home. Yeah. We're going to send you to a different school.
This is not Hogwarts. Like, we're not sending you here for witchcraft.
Exactly.
But, so they break
Sucks for her.
Yeah, they break the news to her. And they say, the poor girl was in despair, saying, oh no, this is the 19th time. It's very hard to bear.
Stop working at schools, honey. I know there's probably
but
not a lot of options.
But it's 1846. That's her only option to get married. Her only other option is to get married, and I don't know.
Maybe be a nurse or something.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that way. Being a patient at a hospital, you're gonna see weird stuff anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know. Oh, poor girl.
Like, she was a good teacher and had great reviews. Most of the rest of the time, it's just all of the parents that are, like, being dicks about it.
So she did know that it was happening. Like, it's not her first rodeo.
Well, it's her 19th rodeo.
Apparently. So she probably wasn't even surprised. She was just like, oh, it's happening again.
Number 19.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Maybe 20 is her lucky number.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, it's again, like, unless until she gets married, teaching is basically her only option for some kind of income.
But hey, when she gets married, her husband gets 2 whole wives. What a sell.
Yeah.
Oh, that sucks. Oh, is there anything else about her that happened after this? And also, none of the other schools reported.
Well, it said because she's, like, such a solid teacher, it's literally just the whole parents reacting badly to the body double thing.
Yeah. So if the girls hadn't told the parents, then maybe...
Like, but all of the other schools gave her a good recommendation because she is, like, an effective teacher.
Yeah.
And you're, like, if you're only talking about the skill set, she does great.
Exactly.
But yeah, I'll leave the full link in the show notes. I didn't read all of it, even though it's really, really long. It sounded like I did, but... really long.
There's still a lot left.
But one last 19th century one before we go into the 21st century, because duality is kind of a theme in literary things in the 19th century. The Industrial Revolution is changing social roles. Doppelgangers can be used as a literary device in Gothic literature, where it's called the Gothic double. Motif is most famously used in Jekyll and Hyde, but there's also Narrator versus Rebecca in Rebecca, Jane versus Bertha in Jane Eyre, Our fave Edgar Allan Poe uses doppelgangers in William Wilson, where the
Okay.
main character gets followed by his own double for most of his life. And adjacent to that is Frankenstein, which is the whole question of who is the monster really.
Yeah. The duality of man.
Yeah. And the duality of Percy Bysshe Shelley.
Oh.
So,
God, I didn't even think about that.
1822, Percy Bysshe Shelley apparently also saw his own doppelganger. This is what I mean by the duality of Percy Bysshe Shelley. So content warning.
I thought you were saying that Mary Shelley was being like, Percy sucks. I was like, I don't know, maybe he did.
So, content warning for drowning and also miscarriage for the next couple of minutes. If you don't want to hear about that, Editing Lisa is going to put in the timestamp about where you should skip to right now. Hey, it's Editing Lisa. If you want to avoid both the topics of death and also the topics of miscarriage, fast forward to 36:15. Okay, bye. All right. So, 1822, Percy Bysshe Shelley also apparently saw his own doppelganger a week or so after Mary Shelley had a near fatal miscarriage.
Oh.
And a few weeks before, he fatally drowned.
Oh.
This we have from a letter that Mary sent in August of 1822. Apparently, the night of June 22nd into the 23rd, Percy had a nightmare about the house collapsing in a flood. And this we hear from Mary's letter, August 15th of 1822. So apparently, in the morning, Mary and Percy talk about the dream the next morning. And she says, quote, talking over the next morning, he told me that he had many visions lately. He had seen the figure of himself, which met him as he walked on the terrace and said to him, how long do you mean to be content? Not very terrific words, and certainly not prophetic of what has occurred. But Shelley had often seen these figures when ill. But the strangest thing is that Mrs. Williams saw him. Now Jane, though a woman of sensibility, has not much imagination and is not in the slightest degree nervous, neither in dreams or otherwise. She was standing one day, the day before I was taken ill, which is her way of referring to the near fatal miscarriage.
Yeah.
And the day before I was taken ill, which was June 15th. And they're talking about something that happened June 22nd into the 23rd. She was standing one day, the day before I was taken ill, at a window that looked on the terrace with Trelawney. It was day. She saw Shelley pass by the window, as he often was then, without a coat or jacket. He passed again. Now, as he passed both times the same way, as from the side towards which he went each time.
Yeah, that's suspicious.
So it's like she doesn't actually specify, but
I'm guessing it's like
right to the left, and then 30 seconds later he comes back from
right
the
to the left,
yeah.
yes.
Passed both times the same way, and as from the side towards which he went each time, there was no way to get back except to pass the window again, except over a wall 20 feet from the ground. So like there's no way he could have looped back again in 30 seconds. She was struck at seeing him pass twice thus, and looked out, and seeing him no more, she cried, good God, can Shelley have leapt from the wall? Where could he have gone?
That's hilarious.
Shelley said, Trelawney, no, Shelley's passed, what do you mean? Trelawney said she trembled exceedingly when she heard this, and it proved indeed that Shelley never had been on the terrace, and was far off at the time that she saw him. So, like, Percy Bysshe Shelley was not even in the garden at the time. But yeah, that was apparently about a week after, again, the near fatal miscarriage, and then in the week before, the fatal drowning. Or like 10 days before the fatal drowning.
Have you heard of the horror, I guess, I think it's like, it's a movie called Lake Mungo.
No.
Have you heard of it?
No.
Okay. It is a, obviously, fiction movie, but it's done in the style of a mockumentary. Like, it was from 2008. So it was like when mockumentaries were kind of like The Blair Witch and like Paranormal Activity, that kind of it's an Australian movie, if I remember correctly. But it's basically a horror movie in which a girl drowns on a family vacation. And then the documentary or mockumentary is about the family. They like see ghosts in the house, and like spoilers for this movie, but basically at the end of the movie, they find her cell phone, which has a recording that was taken like shortly before her death, or maybe not shortly before, but a recording of on her phone, and the recording is somebody walking towards her, and it's her
Her doppelganger.
her doppelganger, but like drowned version, like how she looked when she was found dead. So she knew that she was going to die
Yeah.
because she had seen her doppelganger
Coming
coming
towards her.
towards her.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's like this whole idea of the doppelganger being kind of an omen of death, or an omen of something bad happening.
Yeah.
It's just
It's
insane.
so weird.
Yeah.
It's so weird. So last couple, I got from Reddit. So it's still going on, folks. I think I'm gonna do 2 of the 3 that I've gathered.
We can always read more on another episode.
Yeah.
If we ever want to deep dive again, because there's a lot to cover here.
Yeah. One day, years ago, I ran into a friend I hadn't seen for a few months. I said hello, and she got a bit snippy with me and made the remark, "Oh, now you're talking to me." I was bewildered, and even more so when she told me she had seen me in her church at the 11 o'clock Mass the past 3 Sundays. She talked to me at each Mass, but I either glared at her or ignored her. I told her that I went to my church's Saturday 5 o'clock evening Mass and was nowhere near her church at that time. She kept insisting that it was me, so I suggested that I go to Mass with her the following Sunday, and I did. And quote unquote, I wasn't there that day. We'd gone through grade school and high school together, and she knew me and swore up and down that it was me, dressed in the exact same coat I wore, the same makeup and perfume. So how was I there when I wasn't? It was truly mysterious.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
But also, I totally understand the friend. If I try to talk to someone for 3 weeks,
Then
and
it's
they
like, what do you?
me,
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
oh, now you want to talk to me?
But it is wild that she shows up 3 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
That the double shows up 3 weeks in a row. And especially if the original person already has a community and like her routine is Saturday evening, not Sunday morning. Like it would make a little bit more sense if the routine was Sunday morning, but it's also still like, it's still weird.
It's weird. It's also like, okay, what is a doppelganger? Because obviously it's not demonic if it's going to church and fine.
Yeah.
It's
And
so weird.
Yeah.
I'd be freaking out if I was the like friend. Like next time I see them in Mass, I'd be like, "Are you for real? Are you you?"
But last one.
Okay.
Around 15 years ago, when both my kids were toddlers, I was putting them to bed one night, and my son was adamant that he wear his favorite red race car pajamas.
Okay.
I happily obliged, helped him change into them, and tucked him into bed. Then I sat down at my kitchen table with a friend who had come over to chat and catch up. The way that my apartment was set up, you could see my kid's bedroom doorway from the kitchen table. My friend and I were talking for a while before we were suddenly interrupted by the sound of my son screaming. We both turned and looked at the bedroom doorway and saw my son standing there loudly crying/shrieking and wearing his green pajamas with airplanes. Everything inside of me was screaming that this was wrong. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end and a cold shiver shot down my spine. My friend and I wordlessly stared at each other for a second. We both knew that my son couldn't change his pajamas by himself yet. We looked back at the doorway and my son was gone. We ran to the bedroom and found him tucked into bed, still sleeping peacefully in his red race car pajamas.
Oh, that is creepy.
My friend asked me if I saw him standing there in his green airplane pajamas, and I confirmed that I had. My friend freaked out and left.
Yeah, me too, girl.
Same. I slept on my kid's bedroom floor that night to make sure nothing happened to them. My friend and I still talk about it to this day. It's one of the craziest things that's ever happened to me. My son, of course, doesn't remember any of it, but he loves hearing the story of how his doppelganger scared the crap out of us, lol.
Oh my God. That reminds me of the like the like little 2 sentence horror stories
Yeah.
thing, where it's like I tucked my kid into bed and he asked to see if there were any monsters under the bed, so I checked under the bed and my kid was right there saying,
Mommy, there's a monster on my bed.
yeah.
Yeah. That one also freaks me out. With all that said, welcome to 2025. And that's all I have for you tonight.
Homie, if I see you in the street, you better say hi to me.
I will, I promise.
Okay.
Unless I sincerely don't see you. The only time that's almost happened to me is like I was in college and wasn't wearing my glasses or my contacts at the time because I have a very low prescription and it's not a huge thing. We were about to go on choir tour, and getting on the bus, the seating politics is always like whatever. And a friend of mine had found a seat towards the back and was trying to save me a seat towards the back. And I couldn't quite recognize faces at a distance at that point. So she was waving and I was just like, what? And she's like, I thought you were mad at me because apparently turns out I have a death glare when I'm really just trying to see who you're waving at. And then I sat in the front because I didn't recognize that that's my friend trying to wave me over.
Funny.
If I'm actively mad at somebody, at the time what I would do is just like glare and ghost. And so she thought I was mad at her because that's what Lisa does when Lisa's mad and 20 years old.
Oh my god. That is so funny. No, basically, if anybody has any secret twins, now's the time to talk about it because we don't want anybody accidentally.
Yeah, I feel like that's the only reason to do ancestry at this point is to make sure you don't have a secret twin.
They say that there's at least 7 people in the world that look like you.
Yeah. Oh my god.
We are gonna have to do a part 2 for this.
There are so many parts because like there's so many like modern threads. There's like, well, in this other region of the world they call it this thing, so let's go into that and that kind of thing.
But this is fun.
Yeah, if you have a doppelganger story, send us an email.
Oh my god.
drearymidnightpodcast@gmail.com. Would love to hear it. Would love to do like a listener tales episode at some point. So best way to do that, send us an email, drearymidnightpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to hear bloopers from Christmas Carol, support us on Patreon, patreon.com/drearymidnight. I'll hopefully be posting those for this month's bonus episode. And if you want to see us on social media, follow us on Instagram @drearymidnightpod. With all that said, drink your water, take your meds, don't get haunted, especially by doppelgangers. And safe travels home on this dreary midnight. Good night.
Good night.